This is one of the videos in the Digital Drama Workshops project. We're talking about how to move youth theatre online and still preserve many of the features that would happen in youth theatre and good youth theatre, quality youth theatre, if it were in a studio environment in person. And most youth theatre works in a long-term commitment from young people where they form an ensemble, for example, is the word we use for the group, where they come together and are part of an ensemble that might last anywhere between 2 years or 6 years, depends on that ensemble's interest. They kind of grow together as a group of young people and they develop projects that suit them at various stages of their lives. One of the major things that youth theatre is not, on which it should not be online either, is school. It shouldn't look like school or feel like school. There are many features of youth theatre that are different. You know, it's participatory, it's voluntary involvement. It doesn't have prescribed learning material. You know, that there are certain things you have to get through every year, like you do in school. There are no modules, really. You know, we don't have a module on, say, Stanislavski, or a module on voice work, or a module on viewpoints, or an acting technique that occurs every year, that kind of thing. These things are studied, but they're studied when the young person is ready, or the ensemble is ready to look at this particular thing. There's not strict attendance either, as there would be in school. Neither is there benign propaganda. By that I mean that when an ensemble devises or creates a piece of theatre about a theme that they choose, they often don't know the results of that theme or investigation, shall we say, until they perform it, or until they research it at least. In a benign propaganda, it's something like maybe saying that drugs are bad for you. You know, it's a propaganda, but it's benign. It's good. It's a message that's very clear. Working together in teamwork is good. You know, those are benign propaganda messages, and quite often we find in ensembles that this messaging is there, but our young people won't necessarily make anything or get engaged by that because they know this already. They know those messages already, so they're not going to make plays or devise pieces about stuff that they know and that they're sharing with the world. You know, that it's good to be kind and all of those kind of things. They want to go a bit deeper, and they want to investigate a bit deeper. They want to find out what they don't know. They don't want to make plays about things that they know and that the audience knows, and that we're all sharing in this idea that, you know, what is being said on the stage we all sign up to or agree with. So known conclusions, if you like. We're not making theatre about conclusions that are already known by everybody. Instead, youth theatre and good youth theatre employs what I call a pedagogy of surprise. That means it's a learning style, or a way of working, a way of learning that is based on surprise and based on the unknown. Young people will really be engaged with it if they don't know what will happen next. You know, if we can share this idea that the new and the unknown is full of potential, positive potential for growth and discovery, that you can learn unexpectedly there. So that's why we don't have modules. That's why we don't have, next week you're going to be studying this. Next week we're going to look for 3 weeks at Commedia dell'arte. You're going to turn up as a young person, and they have an idea it might be good in the workshop, because it has been so far, but they won't know what's going to happen, you know, necessarily. They can't predict exactly what's going to happen. And we try to keep it a little bit like that. I'm not saying that we cultivate mystery and suspense, rather that we just develop the unknown a bit more. So when people make theatre and they ask questions about things like, what should we do next, or how am I going to do this? My response as a facilitator is, I don't know. What will we do next, or how are we going to do this? We find it out together, and that creates an ensemble that's very open to unexpected things, very open to proposals. So for example, they can travel quite easily with a show to another country, take part in an exchange, use the Erasmus Plus program. The basic guiding force behind what we're doing is asking the same kind of questions that scientists ask.
Right.
What would happen if? It's fueled by curiosity. So online workshops and online development programs also need to be fueled by these principles, you know. It's very easy when you're making an online workshop or a digital drama workshop to have it planned to the very last moment. Whereas we need to leave a lot more room in our workshops for the young people to discover stuff and to find out what that discovery is like, to process the discovery. We need room for their imagination and room for their curiosity. And when they're developing at this level, we can begin then to weave in some political and social issues into this theme or into this discovery. We're talking about helping a group have a sense of performing themselves, performing the self. It draws a lot on Erving Goffman's presentation of self in everyday life. There'll be a link at the end to this. It's an idea of performing a character that is fictionalizing your own experience, but really is partly about your experience. There's a sense of a backstage area, costumes and props that go to support this character. There's an idea that maybe you're showing many parts of yourself that you wouldn't normally show at once. Or you get to be eccentric, for example, you know, when you mightn't be too eccentric. You might perform a feminine or a masculine side. There's lots of sense of selves that you can perform. And theatre does that really, really interestingly and well. You know, mostly if you're not involved in that, you have to go away, go abroad, or go to university to change your identity or experiment with your identity. It's also a way where you can learn how to talk to other people, how to make small talk in a devising scenario. You know, people will help you do that. Other themes that have been explored in the past is looking at not just what beauty is, but analysing the social and cultural construction of beauty. You know, how is this the kind of thing we accept in this century as beautiful? But mostly it's about power, questions of power in personal relationships or in structured social systems like education or social welfare or labour market, questions of gender, and how that relates to culture and is it different in other cultures. And this kind of social and cultural awareness is a discussion. But we use theatre to have this discussion. And good theatre does this. I think that also we don't push too much our own interests as facilitators. We certainly need to be interested and we certainly need to find out a lot ourselves. But a youth theatre that is dominated by a person who is interested in just one thing or two things and keeps exploring that and not really paying attention to what the young people want to know is not necessarily one that I would call good practice.
Sure.
We focus as well on the much more on the method we do as trainers, as artists and as facilitators, much more on the method than on the content. The content is kind of up to the young person to provide, you know, the theme, the idea. But we're looking at teaching methods, how to tell traditional narratives, how to use unreliable narrators, how to tell stories that are cyclical, that have recurring structures. We're not talking about themes. We provide the structure, and the young people have to provide the theme that goes into it. Mostly, you know. I mean, yes, we can say something at Halloween or something. Our theme is scary, make the audience scared or something. But generally, it's about providing them with the opportunity to talk about anything they like within the structure that we're teaching. So we might be teaching verbatim theatre or commedia dell'arte or Shakespearean verse or performing classical drama, methods in doing this. And this is very different to what they're learning elsewhere. They're not learning these things in any other environment, and that adds to how it's engaging. It adds to its attraction as an art form. So what we're trying to provide, both online and offline, to sum up really, is an aesthetic engagement, where young people are engaged intellectually with learning the new method or trying to approach it or use it. They're engaged with their emotion because they're expressing their own themes and ideas and watching other people do the same thing. They're engaged with their bodies, and this is the hardest part to transfer online because they're moving in space and around each other. But a lot of our workshops online will have that physical element included. And they're using their imagination because they've got to connect what is happening in the drama, in the fiction, with what's happening in the political or social or personal sphere. They have to make that connection. Otherwise, it's too divorced from the reality of what they know to be true, of their lives. We're not talking about just focusing exclusively on documentary theatre, that it doesn't work unless it's completely 100% your life. No, we're talking about what's true, what they know to be true, because they know what fake acting is, they know what fake stories are, they know what sounds cliched, they know what sounds shamefully sentimental. They know this, so we avoid that kind of falseness. And their imagination then is used to make the connection with what is true. So I think it's the opposite of an anesthetic engagement, where their senses are cut off. In this whole process, we're working with mental health, and that's one of the themes that we want to talk about, because many young people today, in the early part of the 21st century, are not really comfortable with being social. And they don't necessarily have the skills to be fully social or to develop social awareness, skills like give and take and collaboration, getting to know people, approaching unknown people. They even, see, in a way, the idea of an unknown person as a bit of a threat, a randomer or whatever it's called, rather than a welcome opportunity into another world. So part of what we're doing in youth theatre is teaching young people to be communal and social. We find recently as well, in the last 10 years or so, that many young people have anxiety or depression, and that they're trying their best to cope with this in their lives. And that very often youth theatre, or that space, is the place where they're engaged aesthetically. They don't have time, or their minds are not taken up in that 2 hours with any of the anxiety that they leave behind before coming into the space. When they leave, perhaps, they might go back out into the world and into their home environment or school environment, and anxiety takes its role again. But what we're doing is a long-term process that we're really effectively repatterning neural pathways with new experiences and new material, particularly material that teaches young people not to be afraid of newness and of otherness. And not also to be afraid of a various set of skills like failure and challenging material, to feel a sense of achievement when they do something in group, with each other a lot of the time. Achievement that you present something and the others like it in the group and they applaud you. This kind of stuff gradually begins to take over the neural pathways, if you like, and you begin to forge memories and experiences based on this rather than on the thing that causes you anxiety. The thing that causes you anxiety doesn't go away. It's there, but it becomes easier to deal with because now you have a lot of other new experiences as well to compare to it or to go to in terms of default thinking. And that takes a long time, a year, 2 years, 3 years it can take for young people. So basically what I'm saying is that over time we notice that involvement in quality youth theatre replaces habits that are anxious making
Okay.
with habits that are not.
Right.
Habits
Sure.
that reinforce your sense of self and your
Sure.
place in the world. Laying down new neural connectors. And people like Rhonda Blair, Antonio Damasio, Bruce McConaughey, we'll link them to this video. They all speak about this very clearly, the role that neurology plays in acting and how it changes. Because when you perform, for example, you're releasing a cascade of drugs through the brain. You
Sure.
really are.
Sure.
A lot of drugs that you wouldn't normally be employing, hormones that you wouldn't normally be employing in life, unless you're experiencing something special or unique or rare. Performance, as has been said before, it takes a huge toll on the physical body and on the mental body, and can lift you quite high, if it's successful. So that after the show, for example, or after the workshop, it takes a while to come down from that.
Yeah.
Because you're releasing cortisol in greater quantities than usual. This is a hormone that helps you manage stress, the stress of performing, of being looked at, of having to create something. You're releasing adrenaline. That's the one that helps you manage threat and control a challenge or overcome a challenge. That's obviously there too. Serotonin, which balances out those two a little bit in calming you, that's being released. Dopamine, which rewards you for succeeding, and oxytocin, which makes you want to put on your most appealing qualities to get the group to like you. It's the big social hormone. So all those are happening, there and more in the new research that's being looked at. They're being released by actors all the time, and when you come through 2.5 hours of that. You or if you're doing a show or a half an hour, whatever it is,
sure.
There needs a bit of recovery time, after it. So you quite often come down, or the next day you're depressed as a result of this huge amount of neural hormonal release that's going on. But my point is that it's natural, and that it is very, very rewarding. So when it's done well, young people get a sort of an addictive sense or feel to this process, and they would come back for more.
Yeah, sure.
So in devising and in other forms of theatre as well, but particularly in devising in person and online, those skills that I spoke about earlier, referred to earlier, that can be developed in collaborative theatre making are really important for building resilience.
Sure.
And as I said, we have a lot of young people who maybe have experienced anxiety or depression, and resilience is something that they need particularly to work on, to develop. The first way that it's developed, the first skill, I suppose, that people need to begin to develop is collaboration. You can see more about this in our other video in this series about collaboration. For example, learning to give, learning to take, when to do this, learning that you don't need to dominate a group or a scene, maybe that you need to step forward and speak is part of collaboration, knowing when to speak. And understanding that it's much harder to control an outcome when you're working in a group, and understanding that you must take risks, experiencing and knowing that there is stress in being with other people, making a decision and not knowing what will happen. They're all the things that go on in good collaboration, where the stakes are high and where the group is assessed or viewed in its own terms, based on its own work. So collaboration is a whole suite of skills and abilities that are needed to be developed for young people to develop resilience. That's the first thing. The second skill that devising theatre in a group develops is the business of using failure. Because in general, young people are taught, as we all are, I suppose, that you internalize failure, see it as shameful, and you don't share it. And it's not something you want to aim for, let alone experience. So, but in theatre, we need to have failure as definitely part of how we work. It's called trial and error. It's a method of inquiry. It's a method of research. It's a way of finding out what doesn't work trying something out. The whole rehearsing process in theatre, for example, is about, as much as anything, about finding out what things don't work.
Yeah.
As much as it is about finding out what works or practicing the right way of doing something. Because otherwise you just give people a script and say, turn up on Tuesday with your lines learned and we'll stage it for an audience. The process of discovering what's wrong is what's built into theatre. And so we know as theatre makers that failure is crucial. It's very, very valuable. So that's the second thing that they learn. The third skill, that's a resilient skill, a skill for use in building up resilience, is how to defer gratification. Not necessarily to get an instant reward, but to have the reward postponed. To know that the reward will come later as a result of much hard work now. So for example, that's what rehearsing is, that's what devising is. In a way, there are smaller rewards, satisfactions, but the major one is presenting it to an audience and seeing do they understand and appreciate what it is you're doing, and that can be months away. So deferring gratification is really, really useful for all kinds of life events. The third major area is this idea of progression. You can measure it very easily in theatre and in working with others in theatre. The notion that things move on and improve, because the opposite of the idea of progression is stasis, being stuck. And many young people with a sense of depression or with anxiety feel stuck. Not only stuck in one area, but in all areas of their lives. So in devising and in creating theatre and working in this way through groups, we can see progression happening. They can see it happening. Not just 6 months later, they see someone new coming into the group and they say, oh my God, I've moved on because I was like that person. But also reviewing skills that you can now do. They're very simple skills like speaking and being heard, being clear, sharing in a group, practicing movement, voice, action, all of those acting techniques. So you are replacing stasis and regression with progression in devising. A massive skill, a really important one, is number 4, which is using information. Information comes to you in many different forms when you're devising in a group. Another actor might throw something on the ground, you have to respond to that. Somebody will throw a line that's not there in the rehearsal. Somebody will say something, you have to carry on with it. Classic improvisation is wonderful at developing this skill of using information. For many of our young people, they're overwhelmed by information in life. There's too much of it. And a lot of it just goes over their head, or they opt out of information. Or they're stressed by it, trying to manage it all. So in devising, you have to learn how not to be paralyzed by it, how to use it and siphon it and move it, so that something is not useful, something is. Not to get worried by a lot of information coming at you. You don't have to deal with it at all. So that's about reading and analysing. That you can select. You can select. If you get several books to read in your university course as part of your reading material, you can select the books. You can also select what's in the books. You don't have to read them all. But people who are not great at using information feel they have to do everything. Or else drop out. Information comes from the room around you, from the light, from other people, from groups, from actions, events. And it helps you make judgments quickly. That's what you've got to do with information. Make them quickly. And if they're wrong, they're wrong. You learn that they're wrong. So built into that is failure, but also success. And this making judgments quickly we call it agency. Having agency. Being able to do things based on opinions and judgments. Acting physically, on the basis of information. That's a really critical skill. It leads into number 5, which I suppose is a very important skill for people with depression. It's about managing impulses.
Right.
Because very often people hold their impulses, control them all the time, and don't let them develop, and maybe they become overwhelmed and get really sad and upset and or angry or aggressive, or violent or drunk or harmful to themselves or to others. They're all symptoms of these impulses not being channeled, not being expressed, and not being used. You know, we see young people learn very simple impulses like when to speak, what kind of things are appropriate to say in this group, and what kind are appropriate to say in that group, how to speak, how to act, how to behave, how to carry yourself in the world. All of those are based on impulses. Many have impulses where they say everything and do everything, and they learn appropriateness, their standards of appropriateness, not anybody else's. You know, as they go through the youth theatre, the right action for the right time and the right place. All of this then is about number 6, the skill of managing stress and realizing that it's useful. It's a way that you overcome challenges, that motivates you. Stress is the thing that makes you cross the hurdle, get up and do the show. It's a stimulus to get into the new or the unknown, to walk into that group you don't know. They make plays then that the themes are more about their own ideas, you know. It can be about their experiences or their understanding of the world. You know, maybe it's about school, and school mightn't come off so favorably in that. And maybe our job sometimes is to question that and pose another question to challenge the particular view they have, or to go a bit deeper in the research, if you like. So it helps them express opinions about political or social themes, for example. And lots of groups have the same ideas over and over again about various themes. So again, we try to challenge them to think a little bit differently about it. In a definite way, they are researching. They're researching the world around them, and they're making theatre about this. When you're devising, that's what you're doing. You're using yourself, your friends, the people you see, your family structure and your community as material to make theatre, you know, to explore those ideas. And often those ideas are very critical. So, for example, they've made plays about migration and the impact on Europe of not responding adequately to migration. Questions of philosophy, connecting things like science, the second law of thermodynamics, things fall apart, to your own life, the ideal of a Western civilization. All those are things that they make performances about. They're their themes. So ultimately, with devising both online and in person, why it builds this self-esteem. We often hear people say theatre and the arts are good for self-esteem. They increase your self-confidence, but nobody really explains why or how. How do they do that? And this is what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying with this video, that here are the ways it does this. It does it in those moments here. That we've, about using information. It does it by helping you make judgments and so on. Devising does this. It also helps you reimagine your family, to create a new one. Older brothers, younger sisters, older sisters, younger brothers. This kind of idea of belonging is really, really important. And also, in devising, if something is good and the other people in the group like what you've done and appreciate it, it's not too big a leap to go from there to thinking about, well, if they appreciate it, they might appreciate me, the person doing the devising or doing the action. And so you begin to see yourself in that mix, that people appreciate you, they like you, they understand you, they approve of you, you're all right, that kind of thing. You begin to like yourself a bit more. And from there, we begin to think about, how can we change things then, in the future, go into the future, not just dealing with the present, but learning to transgress, as Bell Hooks writes about in her book on education, which we'll link at the end. Learning to be bold, not necessarily to completely conform all the time to systems, but figure out how can you change a system to suit your needs, not the other way around.
Yeah.
So you don't spend your life trying to change your needs so that you can fit into this system, that system, and the other one. You change the system, if possible, so that it can satisfy your needs and other people's needs.